Welcome to another episode of the Keto Pro podcast with myself, Richard Smith. Today, I'm joined by a very good friend of mine, Ankur, who is an emergency med specialist and the co-founder, or the founder, actually, the only founder, I believe, of the DesiM project. Ankur, welcome on board.
Thank you so much, Rich. It's an absolute pleasure to come on your podcast. I've been waiting for it for a while now.
An absolute pleasure to have you on. Have I pronounced your name correctly, first and foremost? Is that...
Yeah, that's something a lot of people get confused about. So yeah, I mean, it's basically Ankur. You said quite well. A lot of people actually, it's easy for them to say Anchor. Uh, but yeah, I go with the flow, so it's okay. Absolutely.
Ankur, there we are.
Yeah.
Ankur,
Yeah.
there, with an emphasis on the "er." Love it.
Yeah.
Awesome stuff. Yeah, look, I've been really looking forward to this. You were kind enough to invite me on your show recently, and that was an incredible episode. I'll pop a link below for that also, because that's another fantastic episode to watch. But look, thank you for coming on board. Great to get you on. Would you like to tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, so like Rich, you've already mentioned, I'm an emergency medicine specialist. So I've been practicing emergency medicine since about 2007, 2008. And yeah, I mean, we've been saving as many lives as possible. We save some, we save most, we lose some. But my paths have crossed with metabolic syndromes and metabolic health now, because I've actually realized that, we studied medicine to just give medicine to patients, I don't know of any doctors who would proudly say that the footfall of their patients has gone down because they've actually reversed their diseases and they're off medications, and now they're getting newer patients who want to get off their medications. I don't know many doctors like that. But yeah, I mean, this journey actually started 3 years back. I mean, my triglycerides came out to be 600. My HDLs were low, so you can understand that I was having some kind of a metabolic syndrome because my TG2 HDL ratio was 16. I had no idea about metabolic syndrome at that time, but I knew that high TGs are not good for me. But I'd been working out for very long, but as a lot of trainers actually put you on the wrong path by just telling you eat whatever you want, eat however much you can. Since you're working out so much, you need all the calories. Obviously, it wasn't working out for me. But then yeah, I cut off my sugars and my processed foods at that time, and realized that I never had too much of cravings for sugar once I cut it off, which is actually quite surprising. I didn't have any of the withdrawal symptoms that a lot of people have. But I basically went into sort of like a keto, and I was counting my calories using an app to bring down my weight. I was 86 kilos at that time, and I'm now maintaining at about 64, 65. But I lost like 20, 21 kgs in like about 9 months. And then I started realizing it actually opened my mind to what's happening in my department, because I see a lot of patients coming in with non-communicable diseases. And at this time, I actually read this book called Metabolical by Professor Robert Lustig, who's a pediatric endocrinologist. And it really piqued my interest into what metabolic syndrome was all about. That's where I started. As a doctor, I always thought I knew what metabolic syndromes are all about, but yeah, I was mistaken, and pretty sure a lot of doctors are actually mistaken. They don't know the basics of it. No offense to them, but it's the actual truth, because if you're trying to fix metabolic syndrome with the multitude of drugs that we have in our arsenal, we don't know what we're doing. you know uh so yeah, so that's why my journey started off into metabolic syndromes, and decided to do more research. I started to read more articles. I mean, I was always somebody who was interested in research. I've published a lot of papers myself, so I knew how to read articles, right? And understand them and make my own inferences if required. So I started off with that, read through a lot of papers, and then somebody sent me Paul Saladino's reel regarding carnivore. I saw that, and that pushed me towards carnivore. I was always a meat eater since I was a child. Yeah, I mentioned this to you before. Also, from the age of 2, I would cluck around like a chicken if I wanted to have chicken, and if I if we would go for like family parties, there would be a separate chicken dish or a mutton dish made specially for me. and there'll be another one which will be made for the whole family. So everybody knew how much I loved my meat. So it wasn't very difficult for me to cut off whatever little carbs I was still having once I went keto and went full carnivore, and really changed my health. I mean, it had already become much better when I had gone keto, but I could still feel some inflammation. I was still doing some high oxalate foods, so I had those symptoms. Uh, and once I started carnivore, I became much leaner. And then I figured that this is actually the way to go. I mean, I read all the books, Sean Baker's book, Saladino's book, Toxic Superfoods by Sally K. Norton, and a lot of others. Lear Keats' Vegetable Myths, The Vegetarian Myth, sorry, Sacred Cow by Diana Rogers regarding beef and regenerative agriculture and stuff. So a lot of them, like a lot of us, have actually gone through those books. Right now, I'm on The Big Fat Surprise by Nina T. Scholz. Uh, so yeah, my eyes, my brains, my mind was actually opened uh, to what I would say. I shouldn't actually, but yeah, misconduct during my years in medicine, and by that I actually mean, I'm happy that I did emergency medicine because I can save somebody's life in that particular moment of time. But what happens to them after they go back home? I have no idea. Right, they put on the medications. They put on the medications again by the primary care physicians, and they're on the statins or diabetes medications, metformin, insulin, all that. And probably the next time they come around, I may not be able to save them, or I have no idea if they die 2 months later or 2 years later. But now I can actually make a difference, and I can tell them, I start counseling them regarding what they're eating. And we're actually doing a couple of research in our department regarding the diet preference. We can get into that later on if you want. But yeah, actually, that's me. I've tried to influence my family, my friends. There are a few people who've reversed the diabetes, hypothyroidism, fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver, PCOS. Uh, yeah, and mm, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm just trying to save more lives by letting people know they don't need to come into my emergency department to get their lives saved. I mean, if they reverse everything, they won't need to come into my department for me to save their life.
You know, that is an incredible story because what I find from the medical perspective is that most doctors are trained in medicine. I'm not anti-medication, and obviously neither of you. I think there is a place for medication. I think if I hadn't taken medication at some point in my life, I would be dead without question. So it is very important. But what I find in the UK that is difficult for nutritionists such as myself who are pushing this way of living is that it goes against what most doctors believe because they're trained in medication. But medication for me should be there to treat a problem in the short term. But we need to come away from that and look at what's causing that issue in the long term, as you rightly say, fix that problem,
Yeah.
address that root cause. And therefore, moving forward, our requirement for said medication is either non-existent or becomes lower moving forward. But what I find within the medical community is that most doctors are all medication. If it's not medication, then it's not a solution. So I find it really refreshing that you are a person trained in medication, and yet you were pushing nutrition as being the number one pillar, the most important pillar, or lever even to pull. So, kudos to you for doing that and spreading the word. How difficult do you find, it's, spreading the word to your family is one thing. I'm guessing you're trying to spread this within the medical community within India also. How does that sit in regards to your profession and your peers? Is it viewed as is it respected? Are you ostracized? Is it something you can push, or is it something that you're unable to push and you've got to sort of do it on the quiet, outside of the working environment? Where does the land lie for you in regards to that?
Well, that's a brilliant question, Rich. I've not had too much of difficulty. I've just had to probably chart it out as to where to start off. So I started off in my own department first, with my own colleagues, with my residents, my consultants, my seniors. So my HOD, he basically turned carnivore last December in 2023, and he figured that he noticed a lot of positive changes. He went off his antihypertensive medications. He lost a few kilos. He feels he looks better now. His clothes fit better. He keeps asking me, what have you done with me? I don't want to keep buying new clothes all the time, because his old clothes
Yes.
don't fit. So yeah, so I started off in my own department. I banned any sugars or processed foods in my department to be coming from the food and beverage department. So even my barista, if anybody has to get coffee, if anybody orders a coffee, the guy knows he's not going to get sugars down to my department. Uh,
Love it.
my patients in attendance are not allowed to order any fruit juices because we get the packed ones over here. And anyways, I don't want uh, the fruit juices without fibers for them anyways. Uh, so we usually get them coconut water or buttermilk or something if they really want to drink something. But yeah, no sugars allowed. And if they have any issues, the nurses just call me to discuss with them, and then that starts off a conversation. You're already diabetic, and they're like, but I take my insulin. I'll take my insulin, and then I get a class with them, which hopefully opens their minds and their eyes. But yeah, that's one way I start conversations with patients. And then there are others who come in with a lot of syndromes. We get a lot of patients, even if they're coming with a communicable or an infection, basically. Probably a lower respiratory tract infection or an acute gastroenteritis or something, and we can see that their past medical history is that they're diabetic, they're hypertensive, they have kidney issues, they're on multiple medications. I just ask them, what do you eat? And they're like, oh, we're pure vegetarians. We eat healthy. I'm like, yeah, clearly you're not eating healthy, right? And that helps me start off conversations with them also. And then a lot of my other specialities, the consultants from other specialities, they come and ask me, what have you done? I mean, we saw you at a different in a different state, and you're much fitter now. What have you done? And then I tell them what I've done, and then I ask them the same question as to, have you ever been trained in nutrition, or have we ever been trained in nutrition? They're like, no. I'm like, exactly. So I've done my own research. It's not that I've got a certified degree from anywhere. I know how to read. I can learn by reading. So I've read through so many papers, and it's not that even if I heard you say something about a certain paper on one of your podcasts, I would go back and actually find that paper and read through it to understand it better. It's not like I followed anyone blindly. Even if I said Saladino's reels, whatever papers he's mentioned, there are a few that I actually accept. There are a few which I thought were not, strong enough for me to change my belief in maybe some particular food items or whatever research that he was talking about. So, I mean, I've done my own research, and then I asked them questions. What do you think? Why did your patient have a heart attack if he doesn't have hypertension or diabetes? Why should he have one? And they had no answer. I'm like, you ask him what he eats. He's purely on a carbohydrate diet. It's full vegetarian. Uh, Obviously, they might be having some processed foods also, but they'll be vitamin B12 deficient. Check their vitamin B12s. Check their homocysteine levels. Probably their homocysteine levels are really high, and that can lead to heart attack or a stroke anytime, or a pulmonary embolism. We had So that's how we start conversations. Nobody has a pushback. Some of them, like, we're vegetarian and we're healthy. I'm like, have you ever tested yourself? Have you ever gotten your metabolic profiles done? And most of them won't even know that you can test insulin. Even I didn't know. That was a shocker for me. Like, almost after 20 years of practice, I realized that we could test insulin levels. Because we were never trained for that. We all only knew blood sugars and HbA1c. And when I tell that to my consultants, they're also quite shocked. None of the panels in India, you have a lot of pathology labs in India, a lot of them, and they come out with these profiles and panels where you can get tested at cheaper rates and get like a whole bunch of tests done. None of them ever have insulin in them. They'll always have an HbA1c, they'll always have fasting sugars and your postprandial sugars, but they won't have insulin in it. Right. So when I discuss it with them, they understand where I'm coming from. I earn some respect in front of them. And then there are cases. We had like a 30-year-old doctor who had come in with a stroke. He had a blood clot in his brain, and he was just 30 years, and then you're all just scratching his head. How the hell did this happen? I'm like, go ask him. He's a pure vegetarian. Again, he will have hyperhomocystinemia. His vitamin B12 level was 60, 60. I was like, oh, he's still alive. But, and his homocysteine levels were like around 50 or 55, which is really high. Uh, and then the neurologist understand what I was talking about. And I'm like, this is what's happening in India. It's not just processed foods or seed oils. It's your carbohydrate loaded diet, be it breakfast, lunch, or dinner. But yeah, it's not so. I mean, I'm still trying to spread the information around. So there's some patients who actually start to understand, and then my team is there with me. So they share my podcast details with them. They share my Instagram with them. They start watching. Hopefully, they start watching. They start listening. There were a few who had really uh, got interested into this because they were like me. They enjoy the meats. So they said that they're going to try it out. But yeah, I mean, till I don't start off my own carnivore practice, it'll be very difficult for me to follow them up. I've been thinking of opening up like a carnivore rehab in front of every clinic that they have. You go get your medications from them. You come to me. I'll take you off your medications.
Yeah. But it is
Yeah.
exactly that, isn't it? I mean, but the changes that you have made are absolutely incredible. Um, the fact you're not allowing sugar, into your ward, um, and even the people who work there are not allowed to do those things. That is setting a precedent. If you go into the average hospital in the UK, there is a vending machine on the corner of every ward, and it is full of chocolate and crisps, sugar and seed oils, and it's everywhere. Um, I spent a stint in hospital a few years ago due to an operation, and I refused to eat the food that they were bringing around. It was all high carbohydrate, all cooked in seed oils, and in fact, my wife brought food in for me. But it was the time, it was COVID was rife at the time, so there were no visitors allowed to come in. So I had to walk out of the hospital, which I wasn't really allowed to do, but I did anyway. And I ate my food outside on a bench in the freezing cold, and it was steak, basically beef,
Yeah.
and that's what I consumed. I was in a ward with people who had similar operations. I was the last one into the ward, and I was the first one out. So everybody else who was in there when I got in there was still in there when I left. Um, and the nurse and the doctors who were seeing to me after, or it was the nurse mostly after, she was shocked at how quick that wound had healed, preceding that operation. It healed 9 weeks quicker than they'd ever seen anything else healed before.
Yeah.
To which I told them, my diet is all protein. And they agreed with me on that. They agreed protein. What they didn't agree with was the fat and the cholesterol. My cholesterol is double figures. I'm proud of the fact it's double figures. And if I test and it comes into single figure, I'm disappointed. Now I shouldn't be, because that's my body's natural level of where it should be. My natural level of homeostasis. But I know how protective and how important cholesterol is to the body. So it's a little game with myself, a little mission. If it does fall into single figures, I'm a little disappointed. And there are a number of reasons why it could fall. I could have had a slight infection or cold or something, and my body's fighting something off. But I'm always in pursuit of increasing, or at least maintaining my cholesterol, because it is very important. Now, you touch base on there on cholesterol and statins. And I know India is obsessed with cholesterol and statins. So let's get into this a little bit, because you and I know that cholesterol is protective, it heals and repairs the body, but most within the medical profession see this as a problem. Talk to me a little bit about cholesterol. What's your view on cholesterol? What metrics should we be looking at? Is it a lever that we should be looking at? And should we be looking at drugs to combat these things? So hit me with it.
Yeah.
What's your view on cholesterol in general?
So I'm going to start off with something that's really interesting that you said, that, the nurses and the doctors were quite surprised that you healed so quickly. My uncle, who's been a diabetic for 25 years and was a hypertensive, was on 3 medications for each, was diagnosed with a renal cell carcinoma in January. And he was supposed to start off with insulin and dialysis. He went carnivore. he went off all the three medications for diabetes. He went off all the three medications for his hypertension. Obviously, I stopped his statin. He underwent surgery to remove the kidney because it was really hurting, and it was a robotic surgery. So it was like minimally invasive, but it was 9 centimeters, 9 to 10 centimeters. That's massive for a kidney. He was discharged in about 2.5 days because he did so well. Of course, the robotic surgery also helped because it was minimally invasive, but that was a major surgery. Removing somebody's kidney is not a minor surgery, it's a major surgery, but he healed in just 2.5 days. And I made sure the food that he was getting in the hospital was cooked in butter and was only eggs and chicken or chicken soup and nothing else. My aunt was also there. She also made sure that nothing else is coming in. And yeah, and everybody and even the surgeons were quite surprised how quickly he recovered from this. So yeah, I mean, that's something that's really interesting. How people recover from maybe injuries and wounds and illnesses when they're doing this. And of course, his cholesterol levels are also high now because he's off his statins now. But coming back to your point regarding cholesterol, I think it's a nutrient for me, and nutrients will never be bad for you. Uh, it's a building block. All your cell membranes are made of fat and cholesterol. Your brain's made of that. Your nerves are made of that. Your thyroid, sex hormones, and I believe they're antioxidants also. And they just help with how your body heals. I was going through my biochemistry books again because we just rifled through them to pass exams 24 years back. And I was just going through it, and something really struck me. It was they wrote about proteins first. Fair enough. Proteins make 3/4 of our dry body weight. I remember that now, and I'll never forget it now because I understand that. And obviously uh, they're a part of every structure that we have in our body that keeps us standing straight and makes us move. And the second is fats, and then it's the carbs. And and so yeah,
It's interesting you should say that because I've recently studied molecular biochemistry. I finished the course recently, and that was the biggest takeaway for me. So, and what I remember is the weight of a cell, the average mammalian cell, 70% is water. Then the next biggest percentage was protein at 18%, but that's 18% of the remaining 30. So the predominator is protein. The next is fat, and polysaccharide was only 2%. Yet,
yeah,
in our diet, sugar, glucose, carbs makes up 70 to 80%. It
yeah,
just doesn't make sense. Proteins and fats make every cell in the body. But sorry, as you just said that, it was just all of these boxes were ticking
yeah.
as you were saying it. But these courses are incredible. So I've just done that, and I'm almost. In fact, I've just finished. I'm just waiting for the grade, but I've just finished a clinical blood analysis course also. And that I found absolutely incredible because it went into so much detail in regards to certain things that I hadn't thought about before. So that I've got a massive list of these courses that I'm just ticking off one by one, just to further build my understanding of how things work, because we know that A equals C. So to get to C, we start at A and we can get it. But where's the B? I want to know the B. I want to know what goes on in between, because it isn't just enough for me to say to someone, go and eat fats and proteins and you'll be healthy. And we know that to be true, but why? And
Yeah,
that's where, the biochemistry and everything comes into it, because this allows us to give these facts that your body, every cell in your body, you're born, 40% of the dry weight of bone is protein. It's made
yeah.
from minerals and protein. Every cell in the body, the brain, so on and so forth. But yeah, sorry, you just ticked a box for me there, and it just got me all excited. But there we are.
No, it got me excited also because I started reading and I'm like, this makes so much of sense now, and so that's how screwed up medical teachings are, because nobody actually made us understand this like the way we understand it now, right? And this is all by ourselves, right? I mean, we're reading up ourselves and we're understanding it better. Now, again, when I was reading through amino acids in the first chapter, and they were like, do you have glucogenic amino acids? Which ones are they? They're the essential amino acids. Where do we get the essential amino acids from? We all know that, right? So you get good bioavailable, biodigestible essential amino acids, all 10 of them, 8 of them, and 2 semi-essential from animal meats, right? So that was something. And then you have these glucogenic amino acids. What they mean is that, your liver can use them for gluconeogenesis also and create its own sugar, right? The one that we have during a fasting state, which is like 4 grams and 1 teaspoon, right? So that again, connected things for me. Then when I was reading through fats, obviously it still had the myth that, LDL cholesterol causes heart attacks and all that, but it's very clearly written in bold. LDL cholesterol, especially the oxidized LDL cholesterol, can lead to heart disease. But they forgot to further the point as to how does the LDL get oxidized? Where does that inflammation come from? Where does that oxidative stress come from? So that's the carbohydrates that you're having, that's the seed oils you're having, that's the extra insulin that you're secreting, your cortisol levels, all of that, all your hormones are not in sync. The biochemistry obviously won't talk too much about that, but then that also made sense that they were actually mentioned as the oxidized LDL, and now everybody's reading through this research, right, regarding oxidized LDL. It's not just it's not just cholesterol, and of course, I mean, it's clearly mentioned how fats and cholesterol are a building block of our body. And then when I went into carbs, it didn't have any structure in our body, in the sense it doesn't contribute to any part of our body. It doesn't build anything. It's either used for energy, like we all know, or it's used to convert into fat and store fat. That's about it. And then they spoke about insulin, and insulin has a very short half-life. Uh, I don't remember exactly how much it was, but again, why does it have a short half-life? Because again, the body doesn't want too much of insulin circulating in your body. So, it wants to remove the sugar quickly and wants to get removed by removed by itself also, and not stay in circulation for a very long period of time. So all of that makes a lot of sense. But again, even in the fat chapter, it's very clearly written that for energy and for brain and the brain, they actually prefer ketones and can easily go into ketosis and and function really, really well. And then there were a few examples about how newborns drink mother's milk, which is about 60 to 70% fats, and that those babies are mostly in ketosis, and that is what is required for them to develop further, even in the womb and even outside the womb. They're supposed to be in ketosis. That's the natural state, so that they can develop. So if something is helping you develop, how can it be bad for you? Be it at whatever stage of life, it should not be bad for you. It cannot be bad for you. So it's going to be very difficult in India to actually fight the cardiologists on that. But yeah, if people want to go the carnivore lifestyle and they're under my guidance, I will taper them off their medications. Uh, and I will have to keep counseling them, just don't worry about your cholesterol levels. I was listening to this podcast where Tom Cowan was there, Dr. Cowan, and he said that he's not got a cholesterol level tested since 1984 because he needed that for his pre-health checkup or something before he joined residency. And I mean, his interview actually asked him why he did that. I mean, why he did not get tested. Like, it's not relevant. If something's not relevant, why do I want to get it tested? Which actually made a lot, a lot of sense. So yeah, I mean, so that's my take on my take on cholesterol. I mean, a lot of people actually waste a lot of their resources and their brain cells and their mental health worrying about their cholesterol levels and their LDL and their HDL. Yes, you need to bring your triglycerides down. You need to keep your HDL high, and the best way to do that is cut off all carbohydrates and eat a lot of red meat. It's quite simple. It's not that difficult to do that.
Yeah, spot on. It's you're right. Why test? No, interestingly, I don't go to the doctor to get tested for bloods or anything anymore. I pay privately, so I get a package that comes to my house. I do a finger prick test and I send that away. I don't test for my benefit. I test for research purposes, if you like, to show, 10, 11 years, over a decade of living this lifestyle. These are my bloods. This is what they're doing.
I'm
And I
doing the
find,
same.
yeah,
I'm doing the same. Yeah.
it's out of interest because I like to know. But I'm not concerned about cholesterol. And interestingly, I was talking to my mother yesterday about it, and she said, "Oh, well, what are you testing?" And I said, "Oh, well, one of them's for cholesterol." And what did she say? She said, I said something like, "Oh, I want to make sure that it's high." And she said, "Well, why would you want to do that?" And I've been screaming this from the rooftops for a decade in regards to how essential for life cholesterol is, and still the people closest to me don't understand. And this is where I find it difficult. Sometimes the people closest to you do not take on board the information that you give. And if you can't influence the people who are closest to you, how do you influence people, over there from a distance? It's so difficult because it's been so ingrained that cholesterol leads to cardiovascular disease. And we're told statins are prescribed like sweets in the UK now to everybody over the age of 50. Statins block or partially block the mevalonate pathway, which is a shared pathway, is part of the HMG-CoA pathway, which allows us to create ketones and cholesterol. But by doing so, it inhibits the body's ability to create things like ubiquinone, which allows us to create DNA. So, I mean, at a basic level, coming away from what cholesterol is to build cells, why would we ever want to not create DNA?
Yeah.
A friend of mine who is one of the top neurophysiologists in the UK works with another professional who works with dementia and Parkinson's patients. And the first thing they do is remove statins because statins have been proven to be a big contributing factor to these degenerative diseases. The brain needs cholesterol. The brain needs the saturated fats. Every cell in the body needs them. Do you feel sometimes that it's just like you're screaming at the top of your lungs and nobody's listening?
I have a lot of people in India for me to for to listen to me. Uh, it's not gonna happen. Yeah, but it happens. I mean, in the sense, I have a few friends who actually are trying the carnivore diet, but then there are a few who actually do. I feel they don't give too much of a damn about their own health. So, I mean, no matter what advice I give them, take medicine or not take medicine, or, do this nutrition or don't do nutrition, they won't listen. What actually pains me is how parents actually normalize junk food for their kids. That's what is the most irritating part for me. I mean, you don't want to take care of your own health, fine by me. I mean, don't do that to your kids. I mean, till you are ignorant and you don't know about it, like even I didn't know too much about processed foods. I used to give my son instant noodles and all of that because even we used to eat it. But now it's been almost 5 years and he's even forgotten about it. He doesn't even remember that he ever ate those. And he loves his carnivore food, and he loves meats. He keeps asking my wife for the way I make my scrambled eggs, and that's how he wants it. He makes his own carnivore hot dogs with bacon around pork sausages. So he's like, this is my carnivore hot dog and stuff. So he invents himself. He tries to do like a carnivore ice cream with like fat, milk fat, and maybe a drop of honey for him or something else. But yeah, he tries to do all of that. He does it by himself. So, but there are still a lot of kids out there who are really obese, who have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and probably pre-diabetic also. And and even if I tell my friends or people I know that stop doing that to your kid, stop giving it to them. They just don't listen. They're like, it's okay. We've eaten all of this. It's just once in their lifetime. Let them live their life. I'm like, yeah, of course I want to let them live their life, but that life should be long and healthy. Not that he's going to develop a disease at the age of 12, 13, 14, 15, or maybe even early 20s. Or why develop a disease anyways? I mean, old age has now become synonymous with illness, that once you cross 40, you're supposed to be on medications. I don't think that is how humans were scripted to live. That wasn't the case. But yeah, that's something that really irks me, telling parents again and again, stop doing this to your kids, but they just don't listen.
It's a massive bugbear of mine. I've got a 9-year-old little girl. And friends and family see these things as treats. I know that they're toxins, they're poisons. These are things that are more addictive than heroin, and they contain compounds. I work with these people on a daily basis, and it is so frustrating when it's only a pack of sweets or it's only one McDonald's. It's poison. It's a toxin. And as you rightly say, it's we want our children to be fit and healthy. We shouldn't have to give them. It's not a treat. You wouldn't line up cocaine and say, there you are, go and have a treat. And it's sugar's more damaging. Sugar will probably cause more damage than cocaine and heroin. The seed oils, the vegetable oils, they linger in the body, causing oxidative stress for up to 5 years. At least with sugar, it's processed, and once it's done, the body can heal and repair from that. But oxidation lasts a long time from vegetable oils. These things are toxins. I was driving my little girl to school recently, and we had a letter basically to say that her attendance has been poor in this period, and it's been poor because she's been on 2 holidays, which to me is educational. I think that's more beneficial than you learn a lot when you go on holiday, and I think those are life lessons. So I'm not bothered about this letter. Anyway, I was driving my little girl to school, and she said, "Oh, Daddy, you'll be pleased to know that they're giving awards to people with the best attendance." Obviously, I'm not going to get a reward because mine hasn't been so brilliant. And I said, "Well, what's the reward?" And she said, "Oh, they're giving out sweets at McDonald's." And I'm thinking, in that, I was driving to school, and true story, this was last week. My little girl's broken up now for summer holidays, and I was driving, I was seething, thinking, the school is giving you sweets and McDonald's as a treat. I mean, for a start, it's a drug, it's a toxin. And again, maybe these people don't understand how detrimental these things are because they are thrown into our face constantly. And I think people are blinded to it. It's normalized. Seeing McDonald's and kids going to McDonald's is normal. It's not normal. They're poisons and they're toxins, and we shouldn't be going there full stop. But I can understand unless people have gone down the route we have and they're not open to it. But everybody knows that sugar is addictive. Teachers working with children with ADHD see this, firsthand. Once a child has sugar, concentration goes out the window. They see the kids coming to school, gaining weight hand over fist with all of these metabolic problems. So whether you understand how dangerous the vegetable oils are, we know the sugar fundamentally is bad for us.
Yeah.
I couldn't resist. When I got to school, the liaison officer was at the gate, and I let my little girl off. I give her a little kiss, and she walked into school, and I stood there and waited for her to walk through the door. I always wait for her to go in because she always turns around and gives me a little wave. And I was just about to walk away, and I couldn't resist. And I said to the liaison officer then, I said, "Do you know what I do for a living?" And she said, "Oh, keto," she said. "Keto." I said, "Well, yes and no." I said, "I'm a nutritionist." I said, "I help people with nutrition, medical problems. I work with the Public Health Collaboration, the Noakes Foundation. I teach doctors about nutrition. I do lots of public speaking events." And I said, and I told her the story about driving my little girl to school and mentioning about the McDonald's thing. And she said, "Oh, the McDonald's thing was my idea," she said. So I said, "But what?" So I kept talking about putting my foot in there. So I said, "I don't understand why." I said, you're teaching young children from a young age that, to do something good, you get treated with something that's very bad for you. It's already teaching them the wrong things. I said, why don't you give them a cinema ticket or an Amazon voucher, or I don't know, but I mean, it shouldn't be sweets and McDonald's. So I give her my card, and I said, "Look, I've done talks before for schools. I'd love to come in and speak to the teachers and educate everyone. Pass it on to the headmistress. I'd love to come in and just talk to you about real nutrition, because I said, the food in schools is absolutely awful. It's not right for human development. And it is rubbish. And I think they know this as well. It's chicken nuggets. It's chicken coated with breadcrumbs.
Right, yeah.
And they're all cooked in seed oils. I don't want to go in and push the keto carnivore type of thing, but I want to teach about the importance of carbohydrates, understanding that they're sugars. how damaging the lectins are to intestinal permeability, to brain health, how damaging the seed oils are. But this is a massive bugbear of mine, because if I had my way, my little girl would be pure carnivore. Yet the outside world see this as me being mean and neglecting my child's health, where I know that this is the key to longevity, health, and well-being. This is the key to her being the best human that she can be. But it is. I think we need to do a pod. This is a separate podcast. How to
Yeah, yeah.
change people's perspectives on food addiction, the damages, and maybe how to influence what parents. And that's the other thing. What do parents give them? Because we're all busy, so they make these things, and you hit the nail on the head with the noodles. We do this because we were eating them. It's convenient. We think that they're healthy, but there are alternatives. There are means and ways to change these things, and we can get into that on another podcast.
Yeah.
But
We
that's the
can, we
next one.
can. That's actually a good idea. I have a couple of people in mind, especially from India, who can, join in if you would like, like three, four of us discussing that, because one of them's a mom in Bombay, and she's been a carnivore for about 5 years, and her daughter's just graduated from school, I think, and just entered college, and I mean, and she's doing some fantastic work in Bombay. So there are very, very few carnivores in India. But yeah, and we're all concerned about how kids are growing up in today's times. We were still lucky because we started off with the good food, and then westernization happened, and then the junk food side. So half a life we actually ate some good food, probably at least whole ingredients, even if they were carbohydrates. But today's kids are just growing up on junk food. Maybe a generation even before today's kids have been growing up on junk food, and that's why we're seeing so many young patients come in with diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, strokes, and all the complications. And that's what we're seeing in our research also. It's quite, I mean, the numbers are quite staggering.
Scary stuff. It is scary
Yeah,
stuff. And
yeah,
you are one voice in a crowd of people shouting incredibly loud, and it's difficult to be heard. But for every one of us that does this work, it's another pebble in the pond. It's another wave, another ripple effect, isn't it?
yeah.
You teach your clients, your patients when they come in. You teach the people who work with you. That ripple effect, it does work. But I don't think this is ever going to come from the top down. I think this is something that needs to be done from the ground up, which is exactly what you're doing. But you're certainly fighting against it. I mean, when we look at the history of India and the food pyramid, let's get into this, because I know that your food pyramid is probably worse than the UK's. So do you have that to hand? Is that something you can share?
Let me just check. I can attach it. Yeah.
Because we covered this when we did the podcast,
Yeah,
when I was on your show, and yeah, it's quite scary, isn't it?
it is. It is, and and shared in the media, in the mainstream media, wildly. It was people just went insane when they saw that. I'm like, this is not right. Let me just open it up for you.
This is my raspberry bomb, by the way. It's not coffee. I'm still coffee free.
Uh,
8 weeks coffee free.
I can't wait for your ketones to come back to India with my niece.
I can't wait for you to try them. Which ones did we send after? Because I think you wanted the vanilla in the tub. Did I send the sachets? The raspberry bomb?
I haven't seen them.
Yeah. If
I'll ask her to send me a picture. Yeah.
brilliant. I can't
Let
wait
me
for you to
just.
try those.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've thrown a curveball at you now, haven't I?
No, no, I mean, you're going to edit this anyways. So, I mean, there's just so many papers. I just forgot what I named it.
Yeah, there's no pressure. I'll cut this little piece out anyway, so we'll just go straight into it when I edit it.
Yeah. Well, you know what I'll do is, I know what it's called, so just gonna download it again.
But on another note, I appreciate you tagging me in the posts as well. So collaborate and post away. It's some awesome content. Yeah,
Yeah,
happy to
thanks.
keep sharing. I'll yeah, I always forget to add people as collaborators. I'll have to start doing the same with you if you didn't mind with anything that might be of
Yeah.
yeah, I'll
Absolutely. Yeah.
brilliant. I'll
So
chuck
we
you in.
so I've got this on now, and they had a couple of diagrams. So it was the pyramid that I had shown you the last time, right? I'll show you the plate this time.
Okay.
You want me to share my screen
Yeah,
with
let's
you?
go for it. Share the screen, yeah.
Uh,
So this one is going to be a new one for me as well because I haven't seen the plate. Wow.
Yeah. So this is
Okay.
what they recommend that everyone should have. 400 grams of vegetables, 250 grams of cereals and nutri cereals, 27 grams of fats and oils, 35 grams of nuts and seeds, pulses, eggs, and some flesh foods for about 85 grams only, fruits 100 grams, and maybe milk or curd for 300 mils. That's it.
So my first question there would be, well, where's the protein? I can see like
There
the
it
equivalent
is.
of one little egg probably. I mean, 85 grams. If that's 85 grams of weight as well, then I mean that isn't actually what is displayed on there, is it? I mean, an egg is probably going to be um, well, an egg's probably not going to be far off that weight, I should imagine. But that is yeah, that is
Yeah, so
scary.
so it's 85 grams, a combined of pulses,
Wow.
which lentils, eggs, and flesh foods. 85 grams combined.
So, I mean, if we look at that combined, the amount of protein in there, wow. I mean, you're probably talking single figures.
Yeah,
S-
absolutely.
Single
One egg,
figure
six
protein.
grams, maybe a fish, a little bit. Obviously no beef in India, no steaks, but even if you have like 100 grams of, you're not even having 100 grams of mutton, right? So in 85 grams, you probably have 30 grams of mutton. 100 grams is about 17 or 18 grams of protein. So yeah, single figures, that's it. And the pulses don't have biodigestible or bioavailable proteins anyways, and they have 3 times the amount of carbs. So I this is how ignorant the dietary guidelines are. I think that, and that's all over the world. And I just feel that this is so much of push and propaganda for this kind of a plate. And it's not that Indians don't eat this. Indians are actually eating most of what's written over here. And there's still a very sick population. So this is something which I also talk to my patients about, that you're already having something that you feel is healthy, but it's not
It's not
obviously
working.
healthy. Yeah, it's not working for you. Why don't you give another kind of a nutrition advice a chance, And I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to make people understand, but yeah, I mean, there's some of them who actually go ahead and listen to us.
That is incredibly scary. When I look at that plate, all I see is a plate full of toxins.
Yeah,
But I can understand why the average person would look at that thinking that looks incredibly healthy. It's colorful. There's
yeah,
lots of color on there, lots of fruits and veg. And as you say, the pulses and the seeds and the nuts, which are meant to contain protein sources, they're not bioavailable. They contain lectins and phytic acids, which block the absorption of many of these nutrients in there. Zinc, iron, and magnesium, for example, can be blocked by as much as 100% with a co-ingestion of phytic acid. And that's not even accounting for the lectins, which will bind to the enterocytes on the microvilli line in the gut, and they'll compete for absorption. They basically reduce the surface area, reducing the amount of vitamins and minerals that are allowed to be absorbed. These are two very different things, aren't they? Protein from plants and nuts and seeds, and also not to mention, and I don't know if I've got this on my desk, going slightly off kilt with this, but this is I don't know if you can see, this is linseed or flaxseed.
yeah.
Now,
It's oxalates, right?
oxalates and cyanide.
Oh
So,
yeah.
so this contains a compound called linamarin. Now, linamarin breaks down into a cyanogenic glycoside, and which eventually becomes hydrocyanic acid and cyanide. So this is an awful lot, and I understand that most people wouldn't put this much on, onto the bread or whatever it is that they're using in their smoothies. This contains enough cyanide to kill you. So if you were to chuck all of this into a blend, in fact, not even all of it, it's about that much. If you were to put that much into a blender, blend it up, chuck it into your smoothie, and drink that in one go, you would die. Cyanide, toxic, yet it's in a compound that we're told is healthy. Now, the argument that I get when I explain this to people is that, oh, but I only have a tablespoon. A tablespoon isn't going to kill me. But would you take a tablespoon of rat poison? Now, the answer to that is you wouldn't. So why are you... Cyanide is one of the most lethal substances known to man, and it is found in nuts and seeds and, all of these other compounds. I'm doing a talk in September. It's a conference that I'm organizing. It's the Carnivore Conference, the UK's first carnivore conference. And my talk in there is going to be on these toxic compounds and how much are going to kill you. Because these foods, if you consume too many of them, they'll do two things. They can either kill you instantly or they'll kill you over time.
Yeah.
Cyanide is accumulative. It's causing this psychotoxic damage, cytotoxic damage. Moving forward, if you were to consume this much every day, it's accumulative. Acrylamide is accumulative. These toxins are accumulative. Just because you can eat some now and not die instantly doesn't mean that it's not leading to a detriment. We look at 70 and 80 as being old these days. The human body's capable of living to 120 years of age. So we shouldn't look at 80 and 90 as being old. You mentioned earlier about being 40 and taking medication. I'm 40. I'm 41 in January. I'm on 0 meds. I used to be on all sorts of meds. I was on meds for everything that you can imagine, and now I'm medication free. I have no intention of putting meds back in ever in my life, unless I need it for, that specific moment. And I have the intention of living to well over 100. In fact, if I don't now, I'll be really disappointed. But I feel the fittest and healthiest that I've ever felt. I've recently started running. I'm running quicker than I've ever run before. I'm running quicker than most people who've been running for 20 years. I don't think I look 40. And when you look at the typical I used to look at someone in their 40s as being old. I feel like I'm in my teens. And in fact, I'm fitter and healthier than I ever was in my teens. And it's through living this lifestyle. It's through avoiding these toxic compounds. But that plate to me now is mind-blowing. I mean, at least the Eat Well plate and the food pyramid in the UK do have some protein on there. And it's probably around 15, 20%. But that is astonishing because all I see there is a plate full of toxins. How do you go about on a daily basis trying to impart those words of wisdom on your clients and colleagues? Because it looks like a healthy plate. I mean, we're told that these foods are healthy. So how do you implement that moving forward? That seems like your job seems far more difficult than mine does, based on, at least we know the protein is important, but it doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got pictures all over our department, right? I give them my example. I show them my picture, where I look like 3 years back and now I look like now. And I ask them to guess my age, and most of them tell me that, probably early 30s or something like that. I'm like, I'm going to be 42 next year. And they're like, you can't be. I'm like, yeah, I am. And they're like, but you don't look anywhere near 40. I'm like, exactly. Don't you know why? Or do you want to know why? And that's how then I get into it, the fats and the proteins and stuff and what they're eating, what they're not eating. And you were right, I mean, you want to live for as long as possible, and I read somewhere where somebody had written, I think I saw it online, which is like the plan is to die as old as possible, as young as possible. So you want to be fit and running, even when you go off at 100, 110, 120, whatever number we can live up to. But you still want to be doing things at that time and not be bedridden and dependent on everybody, and just be a burden on yourself and the family, which usually happens, unknowingly just happens. But yeah, I mean, the importance of protein, it's when I give my own example to my patients, and they see my before and after. And probably that's how I start off my conversations with them. Now, how many of them actually understand? Because I don't get a lot of time with them. They need to be moved out into the wards or the ICUs or wherever. But yeah, I mean, we end up giving my podcast or my Instagram, like I've mentioned before, so they can start getting with it. It's not that they have to just listen to me. Through me, they'll get a lot more resources. Like it happens, they listen to one podcast, another one will play. They'll come across yours. They'll come across Stephen's or Saladino's, Chafee's, somebody's, and then they get into that groove, and they get into the rabbit hole of uh, high protein, high fat, low carb, carnivore, whatever, keto, all of that. And that's what I hope happens to people. I mean, even when I started listening to all the nutrition podcasts, I mean, on my way to work, coming back from work, because my drive is 1 hour to work and about 1.5 hours while coming back. So that's 2.5 hours of podcast is really interesting, right? So I heard a lot of yours and Stephen's, plant free, Anthony Chafee, Saladino, Sean Baker's, all of this over the past 3 years. So 3 years of podcast is actually quite a bit of podcast. Then it came across Wise Traditions, Western A Prices Foundation. So you come across things and then you understand, you start reading, and you find more things as you research. I found Dr. Walter's book online, The Stone Age Diet, which he wrote in 1975, and he's spoken about anthropology, how our skeletal build up changed pre-agriculture, post-agriculture. How our dentition to our rectum is the same as carnivores like dogs, and as compared to sheep, it's nowhere close to a herbivore. Our biology, our biochemistry, our physiology, how it's closely linked to a carnivore. And this was in 1975, written by a gastroenterologist. You ask any of the gastroenterologists what is the best way to eat now, they'd be like, have fibers, have fruits, have your vegetables, and all of that, right? Most of them are going to say that. But this was a guy in 1975 who said you need to eat Paleolithic carnivore diets. So that's how I come across things, and that's what I hope my patients, I keep telling them, you don't have to listen to me blindly. Do your own research. Listen to what we have to say. Go down that path. It's not going to be easy to understand everything, but once you get into it, once you think, yes, you want to get fit, you really want to live longer, you really want to get off your medications, I don't think there's a bigger motivation than that. You know, just the fact that you want to get better should motivate you enough to do your own research. I don't want anybody to follow any of us blindly. Fine, if you want to take tips from us, understand what we're talking about, we're always there. But don't blindly follow any of us, be it carnivore, vegan, vegetarian, whatever you want to do. Do your own research, understand that, read the textbooks also. I mean, I've read the textbooks where it's very clearly written that plant proteins are very inferior to animal proteins. And so for getting plant proteins, you need to fortify them and eat it. Why? Because it's better for the planet and the environment. It doesn't make sense, obviously. But that's again the propaganda behind it. You're telling us that it's inferior, but you still want us to have it because you think it's going to help the environment, so which is not going to happen anyways. You're destroying the environment by growing so many cereals and grains and all that. So yeah, I mean, this is so much regarding that, but it's again very simple. Once you understand it, it's really very simple. You just go to live and eat as simple as we used to years back, only just cook it a little bit more.
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating trying to teach people something that seems so simple. When we mentioned it earlier, every cell in the body predominates protein and fat. Therefore, even at a simplistic level of thinking, well, we need protein and fat, but we need glucose. And this is true. The body needs, there are two cells in the body that we know need glucose: the erythrocyte red blood cell
Yeah.
and the glutaminergic neurotransmitters in the brain. And the reason for this is they do not have mitochondria, and only mitochondria can use ketones for energy. So that's fine. But this is why everybody says your body loves glucose. Well, yeah, it does need glucose, but your body makes it. Your
Yeah.
body is an incredible machine that makes all of the glucose you need, and that's the missing step. But you're right; it is propaganda, and we're pushed from all different angles to live a certain way, and it's just incredibly frustrating trying to spread that word. But you're doing it. You're doing it on a daily basis, and I think you're doing it the right way. Well, look, this is how I eat. This is what it's done for me. Go away and do your own research. And that is incredibly important. Not to listen to any one person. Think logically. Go away, do your own research. And as you say, it is in the literature. It's been there for years and years and years. I was tagged in a video on Facebook today that was, I think it was recorded in 1956, where there was a doctor basically saying, if you want to lose weight and be fit and healthy, then eat meat. And it's there. It's been there.
Yeah.
For many, many years. It seems to come in waves, but it seems to be drowned out by establishments with money who don't want us to see the truth. But the journey continues. This is all we can do, is keep pushing forward. And I think you're doing an incredible job at doing so. And these collaborations allow us to do these things. So I don't want to keep you too long, but I just want to get into one other topic, if we have time, and that's the research that you're currently doing. Can you speak to us a little bit about the research that you're doing in India?
Yeah. So it's not an interventional study. Obviously, it's not going to happen. Not even a randomized control study. So it's a survey that we're doing, a couple of surveys, which is basically association of dietary preference with non-communicable diseases and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So any patients coming into our department who require ultrasound abdomens or CT scans of the abdomen, and they're coincidentally diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver, is included in one of the studies. And the other one, any patients who are coming into our department with any non-communicable diseases like diabetes, pre-diabetes, hypertension, documented ones, and they're on medications for all of these, asthma, Alzheimer's, dementia, hypothyroid, PCOS, cancers, and a few others. And they're included in the other study, right? And they both get their own surveys, which includes questions on what is the dietary preference? It's straightforward. Are you a vegetarian, vegan, carnivore, omnivore, pescatarian, ovo-vegetarian, all of that? If you're vegetarian, good. If you're anything else except a carnivore, which you won't actually get. So if you're vegetarian, vegan, your questions change. If you're an omnivore or something else, how frequently do you eat meats? How frequently do you eat eggs? Or how frequently do you eat fish if you're a pescatarian? Yes, I know that goes into a little bit of food frequency, but most of them are actually very clear. Or we have it once a month, or we have it once a week. So we've given them, do you have it in every meal? Do you have it, every week, more than one meal? Or do you have it every fortnight, per month? Because I think that is how people actually eat. So, we had actually asked a few people before we actually made the question, because we started asking questions. And this was the most common answers that we were getting, once a week, once a month. These two were the most common answers. So we had that in our choices, when we made the questionnaire. And then we've got questions regarding alcohol or any drug habits, smoking, exercise, the oils that they use, sugars. We've even asked, do you think you can quit sugar? Until now, 46% have said no, they can't. And 54%, probably obviously they'll be biased, because we don't want to say that we're sugar addicted, but 50 something said yes. But again, 46% saying no is also a big number. So that shows the carbohydrate or the sugar addiction. And then we've also got a list of the NOVA groups of foods, So you have NOVA group 1, which is unprocessed foods, and group 2, group 3, group 4. So they like that. Group 4 is the most processed foods. So most of the vegetarians are NOVA 1 and 2 eaters, as per them, which are mostly whole foods. So not much of processed foods. A lot of the people are cooking their food in ghee. And the second is, I think, sunflower oil. And mustard oil. Mustard oil is really, it's really rampant in India. So that's erucic acid, that's omega-9s. Not much research has been done on that, but apparently there's no harm or benefit that has been documented yet. So yeah, so these are the basic kind of questions that's coming. What's really interesting is about for the non-communicable diseases, we've got about 28% of the patients who actually came to our emergency were included in the study. 28% is a big number. These exclude the patients who were declared dead on arrival who had comorbid conditions. These exclude patients who had comorbid conditions but did not want to get included into the study. And these also exclude patients who my team forgot to get a survey done from. They knew they had comorbids, but They didn't include them. So it's very easily, it's going to cross like 30-35% of the population who came to my department had non-communicable disease. That's 1 in 3 people have a non-communicable disease. That's quite a big number. 1 in 3 are sick. And then out of we've collected about 1,500 samples in this one. The non-communicable diseases, 62% are pure vegetarians who have a carbohydrate loaded diet. 62%. So there's a very strong association for sure. Obviously, we can't do causation in this, but very strong association. And then those who are omnivores, which is about 35-40%, most 42% of them are once a week, and the rest are once a month. So they're also predominantly plant-based. I mean, they hardly eat any meats. It's mostly plant-based, mostly carbohydrates that they eat. So yeah, I mean, that's the story. I mean, and this is going to go on till December 2025, the data collection. So we're going to have massive numbers, a huge N number. And yeah, let's see what comes out. And I'm going to try and get this published for sure. Both of them. I mean, this one and the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. We're getting like young 18, 19-year-olds with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Which is crazy because this didn't happen years ago. You mentioned earlier with the young ones coming in with diabetes and hypertension. These are things that young children didn't suffer from 20, 30 years ago, or at least far less in numbers. But now it seems to be commonplace, which is incredibly scary. It's just a shame that people can't take a step back and just look at what's right in front of you. I was at my local butcher's recently, and there was a lady there who came in, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but the lady was considerably bigger than myself. She ordered some lamb, and I thought, oh, fair play. Lamb is fantastic. In my opinion, it's better than beef for a number of reasons, and we can get into that at another time. But lamb is fantastic. Oh, can you cut the fat off? And I'm thinking, oh, why are you cutting the fat off? So I said to Chris, the butcher, I said, Chris, can I have the fat? And she looked at me in disgust and said, you want the fat? And I said, yeah, the fat is one of the best parts. And she said, oh, but the fat is really bad for you. It makes you fat, and it's, bearing in mind, and this lady is quite literally probably 3 to 4 times my size. I'm single figure body fat. I don't look like this anymore, but I'm not obese by any means. I had with me a friend of mine, Mikey, who is now #1 in Europe in Ironman. So he's the #1 athlete in Europe. And he is like this, super fit. And we're talking about how important that the fat is on the lamb, and how important it is for weight management and hormonal function and all this sort of stuff. This lady wouldn't have it. She's so brainwashed that these things are bad for you. This counter was full of people. There must have been 10 to 15 people there. Mikey and I were the smallest, the healthiest and fittest. Every other person at the counter was overweight or well overweight. We were the only ones that were asking for this fat, and everybody else was picking all the lean cuts of meats and things. And it's like, take a step back. Just look at what's right in front of you. It's there in black and white, but we are so blinded by it all that we just can't see it. And that's incredibly frustrating, especially for you and I who are trying to spread this word. But look, fantastic. Ankur, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I have a point to make. The whole narrative regarding how detrimental carbohydrates can be has actually got lost in the noise of processed foods and seed oils. If you look at India's example, like I mentioned before, also, diabetes has been documented in times when there was no processed foods or seed oils, where it's been documented that the carb eating population of India has diabetes and that they need to increase their protein and their animal protein intake to get away from diabetes, and this has been documented since 300, 400 AD, even before that, 2 to 3,000 years back, when the Vedas were written, they had described diabetes in people in India. In 300, 400 AD, it was again described, and there were like about 10, 12 different types of diabetes that they had described. In 1895 or in the 1890s, the Indian Medical Gazette has documented cases by doctors of East Indians and South Indians having a lot of diabetes because of their high rice intake. and their high carbohydrate intake. Even sugar cane was converted into sugar in India about 3,500 years back, and since then we've also been having a lot of sugars, and the rest of the world followed about 1,000 years later. But yeah, so we've always been sugar addicts and carbohydrate addicts. Sugar by, like, I mean the refined sugars from sugarcane, and carbs like rice and probably other grains. But they've been causing diabetes in us. So one can't say that carbohydrates do not cause diabetes. They do. They actually do, even if they're not processed, carbohydrates or refined carbohydrates, because at that time you don't have so much of processing happening with your foods. So yeah, I mean, that's something people need to keep in mind when they talk about that Indians started to get diabetes once westernization happened. Now that's not true. It's
Yeah,
been here longer than probably any other country,
I love that.
and that's the most important part that people need to understand.
Yeah, and that is in itself an incredible statement. I mean, we do get lost in the processed foods. Yes, processed foods are detrimental, but as you rightly say, carbohydrates are detrimental. And you've proven from hundreds or thousands of years, basically prior to this knowledge, that excessive amounts of carbohydrates causes problems within the body. There's a reel there, I think, isn't there? That little statement that you just give there. That's
Yeah,
going on my Instagram.
yeah.
Um, so Ankur, thank you so much for coming on. What would be your top 3 tips for people to take away if somebody coming into this wanted to start making lifestyle changes, but they are new to this whole concept, and maybe they don't want to become strict carnivore? What are the 3 top tips could you offer them in regards to making changes?
I would suggest first remove any junk food or processed food that's there in your life, and read up on what constitutes a junk food, what all are there in a junk food or in that category. Increase your animal protein intake and exercise. I think these 3 will go a long way in getting you on the right path, and then you'll discover a whole world. You'll be like Alice in Wonderland, looking at everything.
That is the exact analogy that I used to a friend of mine yesterday. I said,
Oh,
I feel like I've gone down the rabbit hole. I feel like, and he sent me back the Alice in Wonderland GIF on WhatsApp.
fantastic.
It is indeed, but it's addictive. It's a journey. It's an education piece. And I feel honored to be able to speak with people such as yourself that are doing this amazing work and networking with like-minded people all over the world. So thank you for coming on. It's been incredible. We definitely need to get another one booked in.
Yep.
But look, I'm going to leave it with where people can find you. So where can people find you?
So I'm on Instagram. I am the carnivore.ep. .ep stands for emergency physician. So, you won't find many carnivore emergency physicians out there. So, it's going to be me. And you can listen to my podcast, which is called the Desi EM Project, DESI EM Project. Listen in, follow it, subscribe to it. Yeah, it's heard in 58 countries. So, maybe you can be the 59th or the 60th country to listen to it.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
My man, it's been an absolute pleasure. I hope you've enjoyed as much as I have.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, and we will speak to you soon.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for having me here. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a lot of fun, and look forward to having more conversations with you.